In this video, we are going to begin looking at Chapter 3. Chapter 3 covers supply and demand. We are going to be covering demand in this first video. We're going to just look at some of the basic concepts. So most of the time, when we are talking about demand, what we are referring to is the demand curve. So the demand curve is a function showing quantity demanded at different prices. Right, so it is a curve like if you were plotting something on an XY plot. It's just that instead of X and Y, we have price and quantity. And so the line is just all those combinations of how much will be demanded, what's the quantity demanded at $15, right? And it's a kind of a multitude of those up and down the curve. Right? Quantity demanded is distinct from demand. With the quantity demanded, this is the quantity consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price. Right, so quantity demanded is a part of the demand curve. It's one of the things that determines what the demand curve would look like, but it is just a singular instance. At one price, how much do people want? The demand curve tells us at every price, or every price in the range of possible prices. At each of those prices, how much do people want? Right, one more definition, and then we'll look at some some visualizations of this. Right, but our last is the law of demand. All right, so the law of demand says that ceteris paribus, which is just another way of saying all else equal, right, as price increases, quantity demanded decreases. And vice versa. And we can kind of write this out. The law of demand, instead of putting it in words, we would put it kind of in symbols, right? We could say price, that's what the P stands for, right? So as price increases, Q with a subscript D, that's quantity demanded decreases, right? And we could take it out further as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. And this does make sense, right? Because if the price of something goes down, either if you weren't purchasing it before, you might be more inclined to purchase it now because it's cheaper. And if you were buying it before, you might now be able to afford to buy more of it, right? And so the quantity can increase that way too, right? This also is going to establish the main physical characteristic of our supply curve. Right, so we'll have our price, we'll have our quantity. I'm just going to label this demand, even though, this would actually be for a good, but it is looking at the demand. So our demand here, this is our demand curve. All right, it has a downward sloping curve. This is due to that law of demand. If we were to look at, say, let's see, how did we price increases? So let's say that we started off with price, right? This price here, price 1, right? The way we would find the quantity demanded for that is to follow that over to our curve. Where it hits the curve, drop down, and that's going to give us our quantity demanded. Right, now let's look at what happens when we increase the price. Right, so we increase the price from P1 to P2, and that decreases the quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. So price increases, quantity decreases. And that is why we have that downward sloping demand curve. All right, also, as we look at this, the curve itself, right, the entire pink magenta curve, that is the demand curve, right? All along this curve, each point on this curve is is like this, right? So let's say this point where we've got P2, right? I think we usually did X first and then Y second back in the day, right? It's essentially, instead of X and Y, we have Q2 and P2. Those are our X and our Y, right? So we've got a bunch of these combinations of quantities and prices. That is what makes up our demand curve. The quantity, right, in the quantity in that pair of numbers that give us the plot points, that is our quantity demanded. Right, so this is an important thing to note. So there is a difference in a change. There's also a difference, not only a difference in the demand curve and quantity demanded, but also in changes to demand and changes to quantity demanded. So in the next videos, we're going to be looking at how or what things can cause demand to shift, cause demand to change. And when we get to there, right, we'll be looking at those and we'll see that the entire curve is going to shift, right? So we might get, and I'm going to erase these in a bit, but all right, we might get an increase, right? So this is an increase, right? A shift to the right. We'll kind of cover that again in the other videos, but all right, or the next video. But I do want to cover it here as well, and also this, and then we could also see a decrease, right? Which would be a shift to the left, right? So it's a decrease in our demand. So that's what a change in demand is going to look like. The entire curve is going to shift. All right, one thing that's not going to shift demand, all right, one thing that's not going to cause the curve itself to change or to move is a change in quantity demanded. All right, so so the price of a good let me see. Actually, I want to reword that. All right, a change in the price of a good does not change demand, it changes quantity demanded. Right, and so the difference here, again, is that when we have a change in demand, what we're saying is that at the same price as before, there is now a more or less of the good being demanded, right? And that's why we have to shift the curve to get the price and this new quantity to match up. But if we are just changing a price like we did going from P1 to P2, right, that is a movement along the curve, right, and a change in quantity demanded. Right, and so that is an important thing to remember, right? The price of a good, right? The price of the good itself is not going to change. Your change your demand curve. It's only going to shift you along the curve. All right, so that's it for kind of the introduction of demand. In the next video, we're going to start looking at the shifters of demand.